Right, right. Yeah. Well, it has been there throughout the history of religion. You can see religion making people or supporting people to do all kinds of evil. And it goes on now. We can see many hot spots in the world, Northern Ireland, Middle East, in India between the Sikhs and Hindus and so on. So much problems either supported or sometimes even largely caused by religious conflict. If we look at history, it has been there all the time, but I hope things can change. I hope things would change, that religion can move more towards the healthy side, that
Yes.
people would have more healthy spirituality and not so much sick religiosity. That's right. Love and the golden rule is basically the spirit of the golden rule is there in all the great world religions. It reminds me of what Mark Twain said, that man is the only animal who has the true religion. Is the only animal who loves his neighbor as himself, but cuts his throat if his theology is not straight. Although the idea of loving one's neighbor as oneself is great, the golden rule is beautiful, but when it comes to practical everyday life, a lot of religious people don't apply it. Well, that novel is really very fascinating because Sinclair Lewis not only gives a good example of a fanatic, in fact, two fanatics, but also he has a mystic. Right, Mr. Pingelli is a mystic. And there is Frank Shellard, who is a half-baked person.
Right.
Spiritually, he hasn't grown fully, but he was growing in that direction. And then there are all kinds of people in the gray area. So it's a beautiful depiction. I cannot think of any other book or any fiction that has that kind of breadth in terms of the religious spectrum. Well, it seems to help a lot of people to some extent. They seem to get a sense of comfort. We all have a need to believe in something, and so the sense of believing and a certain sense of belonging. And some of the programs can be quite uplifting, like Robert Schuller's kind of positive thinking can be particularly useful for people who have a lot of guilt and a lot of negative thinking. And I use a kind of analogy of the caterpillar needing a cocoon. There is a certain stage where it is okay, but what happens if the caterpillar doesn't come out as a fly, if it gets stuck in that cocoon? So I think even Jimmy Swaggart and all, with his elements of hate in his preaching, may have some benefit for some people. Not that, but that they can relate to it. It may be better than having no kind of belief system, being totally confused or totally selfish. So hating sin, maybe, or hating another group and feeling better about oneself, it's not very healthy, but it may be one step for some people. I know people who have given up alcoholism or wife abuse or other things because of this hellfire and damnation kind of preaching. Sometimes it strikes them and they get scared of going to hell, and they make some changes. But then it may be only one step. They may get so much of a superiority complex about now being the good Christian, and then they may be looking down on other people and so on. They're still not quite mature in their spirituality, but it's better than what they were before. I look at love from the point of view of the love in general, all the basic elements of love and deep love between husband and wife, or between close friends and parents and children and so on. the knowledge, care, respect, and responsibility are basic to all kinds of love. To know, care, care in terms of nurturing, and responsibility, maybe in the sense of duty, as you mentioned. Or when it comes to a deeper love, it is more of responding to the other person's need. Like the example in the Bible of the Good Samaritan, the temple priest and the priest's assistant went by and didn't do anything to the poor man on the roadside. They may have been going around doing their duty, but the Good Samaritan came by and he responded to the need of the fellow human being in real need. So that showed a deeper love and care, and so that's the kind of care. And the more we love, the more we care, the more we are nurturing not only of the immediate family, but of others. Like perhaps the most outstanding example now would be Mother Teresa, the kind of loving work she is doing because she is motivated by that deep spirituality. Even historically, at least according to H.G. Wells, Ashoka the Great is the greatest of kings, according to Wells. And what made Ashoka so great in Wells's eyes is the compassionate and loving rule of his time. Well, if we look at the negative side of religion, we can see what he's talking about, but that is only one side of the story. Rito asked about the current Pope. It reminds me of one of my relatives who is a monk, a very well-educated man who used to be editor of one of the newspapers in my mother tongue, and I was asking him about our local bishop. He was telling me casually that, talking about my book, that the bishop may have read it, but he, my relative, he didn't know whether the bishop would be quite supportive. And he's made this remark that when even people who are spiritually healthy, when they get into administrative positions, of course there have been wonderful popes, I guess, but politically, the administrative side may not bring out the best. Well, the healthy spirituality shows these psychological dynamics, the dynamics of love, courage, and caution or prudence, that is healthy anxiety, and wisdom. By wisdom, what I mean is a balance between the rational and the intuitive side, and open-mindedness, and a healthy identity. A healthy identity is a broad identity, not a very narrow identity focused on one's denomination. That's right, too much fear. Caution would be a healthy anxiety, a healthy sense of guilt, which is healthy. But you can see on the fanatical side, we can see just the opposite. Instead of love, we can see a lot of selfishness. Or it may be hate, some elements. It may not be intense hate, but certain degree of hate. It may be hate to oneself with a lot of guilt, or it may be hate of another group. Well, there basically talk about three kinds of guilt. One is the realistic guilt. If we do something really wrong, if we hurt somebody or damage ourselves, we have reason to feel guilty. So there is a sense of regret, that's a feeling. And then from that feeling, we can move on to constructive action, to repair damage and to prevent repetition. And like with the Catholic, the sacrament of reconciliation, we can see those psychological elements underneath it, or along with it, we can see. So that's realistic guilt. So it makes us better people. At least it might help us to be better if
Yes.
we repair damage and prevent repetition. Somebody who automatically, mechanically goes to confession, they may not change. And okay, neurotic guilt will be too much guilt about a small thing, or guilt by association. Maybe we happen to be the brother or sister or parent of somebody who committed crime, or happen to be at the scene of the crime, or happen to have a flashing thought, a sexual thought, for example, lusting in the heart. As far as I can see, having a sexual thought, if we come across an attractive member of the opposite sex, it just shows that our hormones are working okay. But if we feel too much guilt about those kinds of things, it doesn't lead to repairing damage or preventing repetition. It usually leads to feeling bad and mad and sad.
Yes.
It becomes a vicious cycle of negative feelings. Looking at the situation realistically, I guess they may not have had realistic reason to feel guilty. They may have had they may have wished that they could bring about the changes without even that much suffering to anybody. But given the complexity of the situation, one can only make it least troublesome or least harmful to people. It's like as a doctor, if I am treating somebody and they have gangrene, I may have to cut off maybe part of their leg.
Yes.
To save them and so on. So we can see all kinds of unhealthy religiosity in Jim Jones. We can see a lot of selfishness. We can see hate, ultimately, and we can see instead of courage, he had become more and more fearful, almost
Yes.
paranoid about other people, and he didn't have healthy prudence about his actions.
Yes.
He didn't show, or at least there was no evidence of healthy guilt. He didn't change. He kept on getting worse, really. And so we can see all those. And as far as wisdom, it didn't look like he was using his rational judgment properly, or trying to learn more or understand more, or meditate or reflect, any of those things. It's difficult to draw. A lot of followers of both sides probably followed blindly. And following blindly is not spiritually healthy. One statement I make about Jim Jones' followers is that they committed spiritual suicide before they killed themselves.
Exactly.
So there would be blind followers in all kinds of situations. But what is healthy would be for people to make their own good judgment. Jim Jones had some good characteristics. He did some good things early on in his work.
Sure.
He did many good things. So people were attracted by that. But then it seemed like many of the followers didn't keep an open mind and a critical mind about where he was going. Of course, towards the end, even those who wanted to get out may have found it difficult, physically and psychologically intimidated and so on. But I think in the interim, before things got that bad, probably more people could have gotten away if they had kept their own spirituality healthy. Believers who are healthy. Some elements of agnosticism is part of the healthy spirituality.